to Dr. Howell.
Hi, welcome everybody. My name is Brittany Howell, and I'm Assistant Professor of Population Health Sciences at the University of Alaska, Anchorage. I'm going to talk a little bit today about the transparency in learning and teaching methods, which is sometimes abbreviated as TILT. However, I am not affiliated with the TILT Higher Ed project. So this is just going to be a presentation of how I've used some of these strategies and an overview of what those strategies are. All right, if we're ready to get started, I am going to jump right in. So the objectives I'd like to cover today is to introduce our TILT strategies and a couple of methods, to describe what a transparent assignment is. That's one of the more popular strategies that I found at my university that other faculty really like to use, to provide some examples of transparent assignments that I've used in health sciences, and to just generally equip new faculty or existing faculty with some tips and resources for how we can create our own transparent assignments. I hope at the end that we have some time to discuss implementing some of these techniques, as there's going to be quite a few that I cover. And as Yanju said, this is sort of the first workshop about teaching methods specifically for new faculty, but these teaching methods are not necessarily something that most of us learn when we are new faculty. So this might seem a little outside of our experience, or something we've never heard of before, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be how you start teaching as a new faculty member. And so, as previously mentioned, I'm not affiliated with the TILT Higher Ed project, which has a lot of great resources that I'll share with you at the end. This is just my interpretation of how some of these principles can be applied to teaching. So, what is it that we're actually talking about here? There's a lot involved in teaching, in pedagogical practice, and making sure that our students are learning as much as possible, or the right things, and evaluating those things. It can seem overwhelming when you really think about stepping foot into the classroom for the first time. But transparency in teaching and learning, or TILT, aims to advance equitable teaching practices and learning practices that can reduce systemic inequities in higher education. And it's doing that through two main strategies: by promoting the students' understanding of how they learn, and also by enabling faculty to gather, share, and benefit from current data about how students learn. And we can do that in order to coordinate our efforts across disciplines or across institutions. It means that transparent teaching methods can help to make sure students understand the how and why of what they're learning in their courses. Turns out, when students are in our classes, they're not necessarily sure why you've given them these assignments, or why this book, or why these PowerPoint presentations. And if they're unable to connect why they're learning and how they're learning to what they're learning, it can be a difficult experience for students, especially those with any sort of disadvantages. So faculty who are embarking upon this TILT methodology are encouraged, even though I'm going to show you many strategies, faculty are encouraged to try to employ one relatively easy, transparent change, and try to determine the impact of this one small change on student learning. So again, a lot about being a teacher for the first time can be overwhelming. And I don't mean to show all of these methods as a way to suggest that you need to do all of these things in order to be a transparent or equitable teacher. I'm going to give you a variety of options that the TILT Higher Ed project has created and tested. And you're encouraged to maybe try one if it feels comfortable to you, and see how that works. So again, I'm going to cover 6 transparent methods today. The first is to invite students to participate in class planning or agenda or syllabus construction. That might not be something that sounds comfortable to you. It might be something you're already doing. But inviting students to participate in what we learn and when we learn can build consensus. It can be a place where students then feel invested in that syllabus and learning as much as possible in that course. Another transparent method is to spend a little bit more time gauging a student's understanding in class, right? Instead of getting up and lecturing into the void for a long time, like I'm doing right now, there might be more frequent checks with students in your class. There might be peer work or asking them questions in order to be sure that they're able to apply the concepts that you're teaching them for the day. I'm going to talk a little bit more about all of these. But the third method I'm going to cover is to explicitly connect with students the information we have about student learning, about how people learn, about how adults learn, about how college students learn, that information with your course activities. So by demonstrating to students, this is the practice that we know works. This is an evidence-based practice, and here's how I'm using it in this class. By connecting those things very explicitly to students, it can help them to really be invested in your course material. I'm going to cover how you can engage students in applying grading criteria on their work. Supplying them with rubrics is one way, but when students are actually able to practice grading their own or other people's assignments, then that clarifies for them the process by which you are grading their assignments. Another strategy is to debrief grading tests and assignments. Many of us probably already do this in class. And the last one I'll probably spend the most time on is a way that we can make our assignments transparent. So a specific template that we tend to follow that outlines the learning goals and the design rationale for every assignment in our class. So that's what we're going to cover. Let's look at the first one. So the first transparent method is to invite students to participate in class planning or agenda construction. And there's a couple of easy ways to try to do this. You can give students an advanced agenda of 2 or 3 main topics a few days before a class session and ask them to identify related subtopics, or examples, or applications that they wish to learn about. So you don't have to start with nothing and have the students help you build a syllabus or an agenda from scratch. You, of course, have course learning objectives and things you need to cover, but you might be able to ask students for a little bit of input a couple days ahead of time for maybe how they learn that material or what applications would be most important for them or most salient for them. So just one example for me, I teach in a program that has 2 very different groups of students. My program is called Population Health Sciences. And to some of us, that means public health. And to some of our students, they are very interested in public health. But I also have a large number of students that take our program as preclinical, right? So this is their pre-med degree. They are going to go on to a more clinical degree program for graduate school. So I have public health and physical therapy or pre-med students in the classes. And that means I have a wide range of student interests. Sometimes I'll have a bunch of public health students in my class. Right now I'm teaching a class where most of them are preclinical. Most of them want to go on to med school. So by asking students ahead of time, how can we learn this particular concept? I can learn from the students that most of them are interested in clinical sciences. So I'm going to focus this particular topic in a very clinical way. And I might use the word patients instead of clients or older adults, right? There are little tweaks that I can make so that my material is most salient to the students in the room. And if you've taught before, you know that's not uncommon. We have a personality for our classroom. This classroom has a lot of these types of students, and next semester it'll be a lot of these types of students. So this is one way we can try to get feedback from students to help build the syllabus or the agenda, or even just the activities and examples that we present to them in our classes, right? I also find that reviewing the agenda at the outset of each class meeting is a way to include students in these subtopics. So just reminding them, we talked about this before, or here's the things that we've decided on doing today. Therefore, these are the things we're doing, and this is what it's going to look like. Reminding them that they had some input in this process is good as well. I try to explicitly evaluate progress as well towards fulfilling that agenda at the conclusion of each class meeting. So it's sometimes the case where I don't get through everything I wanted to, and I remind the students, I'm aware of this. We wanted to do X, Y, and Z, and we only got through X and Y. So these are the things that I might save to next time or present on Blackboard or whatever alternative strategies I might have. And so I've kind of done this by telling students that our next class period will focus on something like ageism, right? And then discrimination that older adults might face. And so I'm setting them up for what the next class period will include. And I ask them to write on note cards at the end of this session exactly what it is they want to learn about ageism or discrimination in my next class session, right? So students have really asked some interesting questions that I probably would not have thought of if I hadn't given them the opportunity to participate. So for example, I had one student say that they'd like to learn more about how to curb their own self-deprecating humor, which tends to focus on the downsides of aging, even though this student was only 23 years old. So that student was already finding herself saying things like, oh, I'm such an old lady because I go to bed at 8 or whatever, and wanted to know how she could stop making such jokes or, redirect that self-deprecating humor that she was recognizing was kind of ageist, right? So I thought that was a really interesting question, a really interesting way to talk about self-deprecating humor in my ageism lecture that I might not have done if she hadn't suggested that. So in order to do that, because I don't know much about humor, I enlisted the help of my partner, who is the director of our local improv troupe. He does improvised comedy as part of his work and his life. And so he knows a lot about humor. And so I was able to bring him in to help me talk about how we can adjust our humor so that it is not offensive to other people, right? Something I just wouldn't have known to do on my own. And so if all of this sounds like too much prep work, it takes some prep work, right? You could simply inform students about the ideas, the concepts, and the questions that you're going to be discussing at the next class meeting. Or if you have a large class and it's just not possible to engage them in a lot of feedback, you could gather a small class committee, right? There's always some students who raise their hand and volunteer for extra assignments and extra projects. So you might gather a committee of students in your very large lecture hall that want to contribute to creating the subtopics or the agenda items in your syllabus. And there's even easy online tools that you can use for that, or I just use old school paper note cards that I hand out in class. So there might be a way to involve students in the organization of some of those tasks. Again, this is just one of several methods and just the things that I've tried. So there's probably many more ideas that you have and things that you're already doing in your classes. Hopefully we'll have some time to share that at the end. So I'd like to talk about another idea. Maybe that one doesn't sound great for you. Let's look at this one. Transparent method 2. What are the ways in which we can gauge students' understandings during our class? It might be asking them questions, feedback. There are other pauses or peer work that you might do with students to ensure that they're able to apply the concepts that you're teaching. And there are lots of ways to do this. It may include creating scenarios or application case studies to test their understanding of key concepts in the class, not later, not as homework, but right now in the moment. A very common set of tools are right here. Many faculty use the think, pair, share method. And so this allows discussion in pairs of students in the class, and then providing instructor feedback, enabling larger group discussions as well. You could also provide explicit assessment of students' understanding with further explanation if needed, before moving on to the next concept in class. And so that may be in the form of a fun online group-based quiz like Kahoot. That's something I use a lot in my classes. When we switched to online delivery in COVID, it was very easy to use online tools. But we can still use those in our in-person or online classes. And my in-person classes love using online tools. They all have their phones and their laptops out anyway. So group quizzes or discussions or other things to share. I also want to show real quickly a book called Hitting Pause. This is by Gail Taylor Rice. And this has hundreds of ideas for how you can take a pause in your lecture and gauge people's interest, gauge your students' interest and understanding right now before moving on in your lecture. So there's lots of resources, lots of ways that we can do this. And I'm sure that you're already doing this, right? People are already engaging in some of these methods, but there might be a couple of new ideas in some resources I'm going to share at the end here for how you can truly try to gauge a student's understanding in class right in the moment. Oops, sorry. So the third method I want to talk about quickly is how to explicitly connect this information that we have about how people learn with your course activities. So we can offer research-based explanations about the concepts or the tasks that students often struggle to master in your discipline. Many faculty use Bloom's taxonomy, which includes competence in knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. But there may be more discipline-specific versions for your use. So here are some other examples. Some references and links will be provided at the end as well. But I often use these items when creating a transparent assignment, which I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. And I'll also tell students in each class period exactly what they're going to be learning, why, and how it will help them to become either a better clinician or a better public health practitioner. So there's lots of different ways in these resources to think about this information and to present this information to students, to say, listen, this is what pedagogical research says. This is how students learn. And therefore, these are the techniques I'm going to use in this class, or the concepts I'm going to use in this class, because we know that these are research-based or evidence-based ways to learn. Here's an example, one tiny example of way that I do this is to connect the course learning objectives to the reading and the lecture materials right in my syllabus. So over here on the left, that first page of our syllabus, which is now like 12 pages long, right? That first page of the syllabus has this course learning concepts. We have to put them in there. These are the things the students are going to learn, right? But then we often don't talk about those things again. And so on the very last page of my syllabus, when I go over the course schedule, I show them exactly which one of these weekly modules is addressing which one of these student learning outcomes. It's actually a really easy way to remind students how you're connecting their learning outcomes to your syllabus, right? So in week 1, I'm just doing the introduction. We're talking a little bit about health promotion theory, and I'm reminding them that this covers course objective 1, which is to apply health education theories to real life scenarios. So every week I tell them exactly which course objectives we're covering. That's just one simple way to remind them that all of this material is connected and you're not just teaching them random things, which is kind of what some students think happen, right? Some course evaluation comments seem to suggest that students are a bit unclear on how all of these things are connected sometimes. So this is one way in which you might think about doing that. The fourth transparent method is to engage students in applying grading criteria that you are going to use on their work. And a lot of students like to see the rubric that they're going to be used on their grading. But it's also helpful for students to get practice using rubrics and doing grading themselves. And just providing a rubric does not mean that they are taking the time to closely evaluate their assignments based on that rubric. Students sometimes see a rubric and see their paper and they think they've connected it, but it's not until they grade someone else's work with that rubric that they're really able to see whether these things are coming through in that paper or not. So for many assignments, it might be helpful to share the criteria for success. When you do this assignment, these are the things that will make your paper successful. It might be a grading rubric, and it might be examples of good work. So I was very reluctant to do this when I started teaching. I was afraid of plagiarism, but I have started to give examples of exemplary work much more often in my teaching. When students have to do something big or scary or something they've never done before, they don't have any idea what a good product looks like. That can cause anxiety. And when students have a lot of anxiety, it might mean that they delay the project, they procrastinate, and they don't turn in their best work. So sometimes I find that providing examples of a successful student assignment, their name has been redacted and the student has given permission. But if I can share past successful assignments from students, it allows them to take a look and see what a good assignment looks like. And it allows students to also try to apply some of those principles to their own work. Plagiarism is always a risk. Make sure that you're checking to be sure that people are not lifting anything verbatim. But I think one of the best ways to address transparent method for me has been doing peer grading assignments. So having students actually apply a rubric to someone else's work has been eye-opening for me, because I was providing them with a rubric and I said, here, go forth and make your best effort. And they were turning in things that were not meeting the criterion that I had already provided them. And I didn't know what to do with that information. You know, I gave you the rubric, follow it. What's the disconnect here? And it's just because students were often not proofreading or having someone else read it. They were too set in their own writing, and they thought they were addressing everything appropriately. But once they have that experience grading someone else's, when they go back to their own, you could give them that last moment to revise their own paper, and they go back to it there, then they're really able to make these connections. So here's what I've done. This is just a real quick example of a very quick 2-page peer review assignment. I give them instructions and some guidelines, and it's a worksheet that they fill out when they're grading someone else's paper. They've been given a rubric, they know what to look for, but I remind them in these questions, and this is a very simple form. You can create a table where they're going through all the rubric very elaborately, but this is for pretty introductory level students, so I keep this worksheet looking pretty simple. But one thing I really want to point out is not just that I give them instructions and that they're grading each other on these 10 criterion, but at the bottom, when we talk about the things that worked and the things that didn't work, I like to pose them in terms of, here are ways you can grow as a writer, as a student redoing this assignment, and these are things that glowed about your assignment, right? So phrasing them as both fairly positive at the bottom helps the students write strength-based or constructive feedback in those sections, right? It doesn't say stuff I did wrong or things you got to fix, right? It says opportunities to grow. And so just the language that students use when they write in that section has become a lot more positive and strength-based. They're very constructive with each other and gentle with each other, I find, when they do these reviews, because they know that they're about to receive similar feedback from their colleagues themselves. And so making sure that we're not using negative language is something that the students have started to do themselves just because of the way that I've constructed this assignment. So I think having students do peer reviews has been game-changing for my course. And in that same vein, along with the other transparent methods for number 4 I'm providing here, I love to provide examples of exemplary work. I had to feel comfortable with that because I was just so worried about plagiarism, but I'm not finding that that's a problem. So here's a screenshot from my Blackboard page. I use Blackboard heavily for my in-person classes. And this is where they can see examples of the final project, the research paper, or whatever it is you're having them do. Because if it's something they've been working up towards all semester, or something big that gets turned in at the end, that creates more anxiety for students. And so showing them exactly what good ones look like is a great idea. And showing more than one is helpful too. If you just show one, then they think it kind of has to look exactly like that one. But showing a couple, like a variety of options, I find to be very helpful for students. So that's sort of another way that you could address transparent method 4. There are 6, so I'm almost there. Transparent method 5, probably something that you're doing, at least individually, is to debrief their tests or assignments. But if you're doing that individually, it might be helpful to consider doing it to the whole class all at once. So whether your class is in person or online, after you've graded a bunch of tests or a particular assignment, providing the class with feedback. Here's what I saw in assignment 1. This was a common problem, and here's how we can fix it for the next assignment. Or letting them know in some way that the feedback they might have received individually is not an indictment on them personally, and that other students probably struggled with that same thing, right? It helps students to identify patterns in the returned work that's been graded and that they've received. It helps them to think about what kinds of test questions were missed across the class or just for them individually, and what types of weaknesses characterize the assigned work. So doing this procedure can also help you realize what test question was a bit unfair, or which area of the assignment most of the class struggled with, and you can maybe try to find out why, and it might be something you can fix, right? Sometimes easy to look at a bunch of papers and think, oh man, the class just didn't get it. Maybe that's true. Maybe the class wasn't paying attention for some reason, but maybe there's something that you could address so that that doesn't happen again or in the next assignment. So I like to let students review any changes or revisions that they've made and whether or not these resulted in improvements. In order to do that, I've scaffolded most of the assignments in my courses, which means that assignment 1 leads to assignment 2. You can't really do assignment 2 without having done assignment 1. And it allows them to revise the things that they got wrong in assignment 1 and to fix it for assignment 2 and then move on to the next component in assignment 2. And then assignment 3 still allows them to fix the things from assignment 1 and from assignment 2 and then address another issue for assignment 3. So because they're all built on top of each other or scaffolded, this allows students to continuously make revisions, to constantly work up to creating their best product at the end. And so you can ask students to record the process and steps that they used to prepare for the exam or to complete an assignment, and to analyze which parts of the process were efficient, effective, or ineffective for them. By letting students, students sometimes say to me things like, oh, I studied so hard for that test and I really bombed it. Can you help me? I don't know what that means, that you studied really hard for a test. What did you do? What does that studying look like? What items did you look at? Where did you decide what to study? Getting a lot more information from the student about what they studied and what that word studying means to them can help elucidate for you and them what their processes actually are. What options are available? Okay, I study in this way, it didn't work. What other study options are even available? And then trying some other study options. It allows the students to recognize what works and what doesn't for them, as well as letting you know what works and what doesn't work for the students. So by having them record the process steps they're using to prepare for exams or to complete assignments, it really allows them to recognize what things are working and not working for them. And it's something you can even do in asynchronous online classes. So once I grade all the papers or tests for a week, I post an announcement on Blackboard, and it'll note the patterns I saw in what the students were struggling with, and then I provide some guidance and solutions. And so since many of my class assignments are scaffolded, as I mentioned, they build upon each other, this helps them to successfully complete the next assignment. Okay. So that's transparent method 5, is to debrief graded tests and assignments in class to help elucidate for them what's working and what isn't. Now, the one I'm going to spend a little bit more time on, because it's a great, easy, effective way to start tilting your courses, is to tilt your assignment and start maybe with just one assignment. But a tilted assignment discusses the learning goals and the design rationale. Why you created this assignment for them goes on the assignment. It's not just one sentence of instructions and here you go, but instead, this assignment is going to chart out the skills that students will practice in their assignment. And so you begin by telling them, these are the skills you're going to learn. This is the content knowledge I hope you'll gain. These are the tasks you need to do in this assignment specifically. And here's the criterion for success, right? So let's look at what that means. There are a couple of simple ways to tilt an assignment, essentially 3 components. At the very top, you should explain the purpose of the assignment. What does this assignment teach and why is it relevant? And that can be the title. You'll put like a little subheading, purpose of the assignment, and tell them what it is. Okay? Next, you describe the task in some detail, right? So this is where the instructions are going to go. If there are any examples, annotations, notes or references or anything like that, that can go here too. But the third section of a tilted assignment, right at the very top here, maybe using a subheading, is the criterion for grading or criterion for success. If you have rubrics, that's great. When I first started teaching, though, rubrics were daunting to me. I did not know how to create a rubric. Rubric was kind of a scary thing for me, so I didn't use it, and that's okay, you don't have to. But in this section of a tilted assignment, you might encourage maybe self-assessment, self-grading, or peer grading of an assignment too. So that's something to think about, but you don't have to do it. At the very end here, I'm going to provide a link with resources, and this one is in it. So this gives you a template for exactly how you can tilt your assignment. So again, it has these subheadings in your paper. The very first section of a student's paper will start with the purpose. You're going to tell them, why the heck are we doing this? You might answer these specific sub-questions. If there are objectives for the assignment, that might go here. What skills do you hope the student will practice? Knowledge that they'll gain? What will be involved? And how will these be important in students' lives and work assignments? It's a lot more information than I have ever put in an assignment before. So again, this is one way, and you don't have to do it now. You can do it over Christmas break for next semester. You could do it over the summer for next year. But think about tilting an assignment. The second section, the tasks. What exactly does the student need to do? And some students need a lot of guidance. As faculty, we like to think that we're giving them freedom by not providing guidance. But students coming to us, especially new students, freshmen, students who are coming from high school, are used to high guidance and structure. So think about what level of student you're teaching to. If you're at a community college, that might be a different role than at an R1 institution, right? So think about the students that are going to be in your class and what kind of guidance do they need on performing these tasks? How should they complete it? What exactly do they need to do? Try to provide clear instructions so that students are spending less time figuring out what you mean and can actually spend more time doing the task. The third section of a tilted assignment, right at the top, is the criterion. How will a student know if they've done it well, if they've been successful? What are the characteristics you hope to see in a finished product? How will the assignment be assessed? Might go here. Maybe a checklist, expectations, a rubric could go here. Include an example of a successful assignment or paragraph or problem solved. These three sections can take up an entire page. So if you're used to handing out one sheet assignments to students, this is going to feel longer because it is, but there's a reason for it. Let me show you an example. So these are on the Tilt Higher Ed website. They're not my examples, but here's an example that was provided by a faculty member from Appalachian State University, a math question. This is her old assignment before it was tilted. Name, directions, simplify each. And she had a bunch of math problems there. That's it. Very simple, right? This is the sort of thing that we have probably done with students before, just given them one sentence of instructions or directions. Here's what her assignment looks like after. After, she's got a title for the assignment, Simplify Instructions, the due date at the very top, reminding us which class we're in. The purpose statement is long. The purpose of your assignment, the reason I want you to simplify math problems is to help improve your math writing, is to demonstrate your knowledge of algebraic manipulation. This assignment prepares you for doing these things in the next class, calculus, to communicate your understanding and where any misunderstandings might be. There's a real life problem sentence at the very end here as well. So this is not one sentence of instructions. This is a paragraph on why I want you to do this in this class. The next section, she's got a list of student learning outcomes that she wants to have addressed. And these came from the first page of her syllabus. I need students in this class to do these two things, and you're doing them both in this assignment. That's not it. So the next section gives the instructions. It's not just 2 words, simplify each. The instructions have been extended. Simplify one of the following problems. Now they get to choose between 3 and include the justification for each of your manipulations, for your expressions. So by providing 3 options, she's allowing more choice from a student, which is another great way to make your teaching transparent to students. They've given a sample product. So here's the product and here's the answer. Here's what a good answer might look like if you chose this type of question, right? So a criterion for success, an example here. Not done yet. She also has included the criterion, a rubric. This assignment is worth 10 points. I will be grading you in these very specific ways, right? If you do the very basic thing, you might look over here on the needs improvement or at emerging. If you do everything correctly, this is what proficiency looks like. Here's how I would grade it, right? So that one sentence instruction is turned into a whole page, but it is important for students to see how all of these things are being taken into account in this assignment. The reason we provide all of this extra information now is because it's been shown to work. The Tilt Higher Ed project has demonstrated that students who receive transparent instruction like this demonstrate elevated confidence, belonging, and even metacognitive awareness of their own skill development. By building confidence and belonging, these are important predictors for the success of students in your classes, in the rest of their program, and even as they go on to their future careers. It can increase a student's persistence in order to receive transparent instruction that can last at least 2 years. So if students are receiving transparent instruction pretty consistently, then the benefits are greater for underserved populations. For example, first-generation students, low-income students, and other underrepresented students seem to show greater improvements in their own success when assignments or courses have been made more transparent. Oops, sorry. Okay, 4 and 5. To tilt or to provide transparent instructional methods, it can assist in the metacognitive process for students, and providing examples allows students to begin at the same starting line. So there's equitable access to the information that you're providing, right? Students who are underrepresented or otherwise experiencing some other challenges in your course are at less of a disadvantage when you're able to make some of your teaching strategies more transparent. Okay, I presented a lot of information nonstop for 45 minutes. I just want to ask a couple of questions of the group and see if there are any techniques like this that you're already using, if there are things that you think you might want to improve, or what seems particularly challenging about some of these methods. So I'm going to open that up. If you want to type in the chat or if you want to unmute, what are you guys thinking and feeling from this information? I can't quite see everybody, so maybe raising hands would let me see who needs to be called on.
Or maybe I can, or maybe I can give a start.
Sure.
Yeah, okay. I'm not a teacher yet, so I haven't using any stuff in teaching, but I am really interested to involve students to help me like to plan the agenda and also in the syllabus. And it's really interesting, and also can help students learn like how and why they want to learn this, and I can put in the syllabus and not like have one syllabus and teaching that for 20 years. That's what I really interested in, and I really want to try if I have chance.
Yes, thank you for sharing. Is there anyone else who's already doing something or found something particularly interesting from today?
People can just unmute and also turn on the camera to share at this time. If it was like shy.
Hi, Brittany, I'll just say thank you very much. I've been teaching for a long time, but I wanted to just come on and learn about tilt because I didn't know anything about it. And I do use some of these techniques. So that was reassuring to me that, oh, I'm doing something right. But I think it's just a really good reminder to, you know, how just small changes can make a big difference in a class. And I also like how you really emphasized, yeah, you don't have to do it all at once. Just making one change can make a difference. I mean, I feel your pain with rubrics. I really don't use for a lot of my assignments, unless it's a bigger assignment, I might have a rubric. For a lot of small ones, I don't, but also using putting up examples of papers, of students' papers. When I'm trying to explain to students what I'm looking for, I found that has just been so helpful to give them examples of what I'm looking for, to give them an idea. And I'll even say this paper is not perfect, but you know, this gives you a sense, and giving the multiple examples is great as well. So I'm just thinking right now that I have some assignments I actually have to create for my class this week, and I'm thinking like, okay, let me see if I can tilt them a little bit more to make them better. So thank you.
Yes, thank you for sharing. Absolutely. 2 important points there. These can be easy, small changes that maybe you just start doing. You don't have to redo all your assignments, maybe a brand new assignment you try to tilt, or a syllabus like Yanju said. But I think most importantly, you're probably already doing at least one of these things already. This is not to suggest that these are the 6 important ways of teaching and you have to do all of them. these are 6 ideas for how to improve your teaching, but you're probably already doing some of them. Yeah, thank you. Does anyone else have thoughts or ideas they want to share about this?
I saw something in the chat. Let me just read that.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, Amanda said like, thank you for your presentation. And I don't teach in a classroom, but I do teach small groups in an applied research setting. Look forward to incorporate some of these techniques to their work. Yeah, glad.
Yes, that's really important. So thinking about tilting assignments in a classroom is one way to do it. But I also teach my students in my research lab, right? I have training sessions for my research students, or an applied small group setting like you're describing here, recitation or a TA or a lab instructor. Even as you start into all of these spaces, there are ways to make that work more transparent too. And it might just be a sentence like, here's why I'm going to be teaching you about this particular method in our lab today. Here's how it's tied to the class that you're taking, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and also, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Also, Teresa said like, thank you, and I'm doing a number, like she's doing a number of these tips, and we'll keep working. Yeah. I want to say a little bit like for like when I was in the Taiwan and also in the United States, I feel like in United States, I take so many like diversity of like teaching strategy, like they use not like traditional teaching strategy to teach a class. And I feel like this small group or like a small class, maybe it's easier to incorporate those technique. Like in Taiwan, I took like class like for 100 people, and it's really hard to like involve everybody and try to pair them, and so many technique is not like useful for them. But in United States, I feel it's really useful for getting students involved in. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. So if you're teaching a big classroom and a small classroom, maybe you test out some of these ideas in your smaller classroom first. Although I might suggest that a lot of these can be done in your large classrooms as well. Tilting your assignments, for example, is something you can do to any size class. Yeah. All right, looks like another chat has come through.
Yeah.
Just want to take a real quick look. I've not started teaching yet. Looking forward to incorporating strategies in the future. Thank you. So I guess that's the group. Most of the folks who are here, doesn't sound like we're exactly teaching yet. Please don't be overwhelmed by the amount of material that I've shared with you. Why don't I go ahead and put a link in the chat for you? This is a Google Doc that I've created that has a bunch more links on it. So a variety of these resources are provided at that link. And let me know if it doesn't work, but that Google Doc should take you to a variety of links. Most of them are from the Tilt Higher Ed website, which has just an incredible amount of information on it. So I've created that link for you. There's examples and resources and frequently asked questions, templates for a syllabus, and templates for how to tilt your assignments that I continuously refer back to. There's also a course you can take on how to make your teaching a bit more transparent. That's the second link here. And that's an online delivery module for learning and walking through some of these steps yourself while you create a syllabus or while you create the assignment. And then of course, there's also a book that's been written about this, and all of this information is in there, providing the research, providing the data to show that these strategies work, particularly for underserved student populations. So as we finish up here for a moment, I just want to find out if anybody has any questions or wants me to talk about anything here at the last moment, remembering that I'm not actually part of the Tilt Higher Ed project, but just that I've been trying to incorporate more of these strategies as I go. So let me know if you have any questions here. If not, then I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye to everybody, and we can stop the recording. Thank you for your time.
And thank you for Brittany